This is an incredible panel talking about something that you may or may not be familiar with, but you will be very familiar with it after this panel. So please welcome our panelists and our next presentation about graphic medicine, the who, what, why, and wow. All you.
Hi, everyone. So quick question before I make the panelists move. How does everyone feel about them sitting here with the slides there versus moving? Are you good if they sit here and hang out? Okay. All right, we'll hang. So this is cool. This is our panel description. If anyone's curious, you can always check out the slides later. I don't expect you to read this right now. But we're here to talk about graphic medicine, and I'm going to tell you what that is a little bit at the start, and then each of our speakers will present on how they're creating and working with medical comics throughout their work. So this here is our wonderful slate of panelists. My name is Matthew Noe. I am a librarian at Harvard Medical School. I'm on the board of directors for the Graphic Medicine International Collective. And this is where you can find me online if you're so inclined. So as each of our speakers decide to present, we'll trade back and forth throughout, and they'll introduce themselves when we get to them. That way you have clear memory of who's talking to you. So to start out, I'm basically gonna tell you what graphic medicine is. Has anyone heard of this before? Some people, you all are awesome. Everyone else, welcome, you're gonna know now too. So graphic medicine was coined by a Welsh physician and cartoonist, Ian Williams, back in 2008 or 2007. We quibble about which year exactly. And it refers to the interface of the medium of comics and the discourse of health, illness, disability, and caregiving. It's a very academic definition-y way of saying that it's comics that are relevant to topics about medicine, the experience of health and illness. This was coined around this time as a term, as a category, as a catch-all for all of these kinds of works. But as cartoonists are well aware, this is not something that just emerged out of nowhere in 2008. We've been talking, health and comics forever. As a quick, rapid-fire history of comics, talking about medicine, this was an exhibit at the Billy Ireland Museum a few years back, looking at comics and medicine through, cartooning from the late 1800s into the early 1900s. People have been using pictures to explain health conditions and experiences forever. This book here talks about mass media comics and imagery. Thinking about Pasteur to polio. There was a lot of these medical history kind of comics back in the day, where medical marvels and great minds of medicine. Those we talk about a lot. I like to use this example this is actually one of Will Eisner's work for hire things. Waiting Room Willie. This was something that the American Medical Association commissioned to counteract attempts at socialized medicine in the United States. You could be waiting in the waiting room forever. So, we often talk about using comics as an educational tool for good, but it can also be used for, all sorts of reasons. We had all kinds of comics about, HIV and AIDS and the epidemic, educational comics, experiential comics, trying to convince people to take care of themselves and be safe. These are some more examples. I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with at least a couple of these. I promise this, I told you this was rapid fire. If you ever need reading recommendations, I'll tell you. These are some more recent examples. One that we talk about constantly in graphic medicine is Brian Fee's Mom's Cancer. This is usually, every time we have a graphic medicine conference, about half the people talk about this comic as being their entry point and beginning of when they thought, hey, I could tell my story using comics. So it's always exciting. I always like to give a nod to anthologies. I'm a big fan of comics anthologies. Here are some examples of ones that are relevant when we're talking about graphic medicine. Corpus is one that I wish could come back into print. It was a Kickstarter, a bunch of stories about chronic illness and the experience of living with chronic illness. And these are really helpful for explaining what the experience is like to med students. That's why I usually am talking about cartooning. In about 2012, 2013, Penn State University Press launched this series called Graphic Medicine. These are some of the early titles that were released. You'll see Ian's book there, The Bad Doctor. Some other examples. My Degeneration by Peter Dunlap Scholl is one of our prime examples of graphic medicine that's been used for medical communication and empathy studies. Some colleagues have actually read this with trainees and showed that it helped them understand what the experience of Parkinson's was like and better engendered, empathy towards their patients and towards working with family members. If you're curious and want to know more of the academic-y side, these are where you start. The Graphic Medicine Manifesto, which introduces the field from a variety of perspectives: cartooning, medicine, English studies, so on. And Graphic Public Health, put together by Meredith Lee Vollmer, who is also a creator of comics themselves, but this explores ways that we've been using comics to explain public health issues. Seattle King County's got a famous one that they made about the 1918 flu pandemic that they put out a few years before COVID hit, and then suddenly we're all like, oh, that was a little relevant, and we wish it wasn't. Some more examples of educational comics here. Vaccines work. We're still having this fight. This one over here about precision medicine is, a comicized kind of poster that we funded through National Library of Medicine funding with local cartoonist Kathy Leamy, and we put this out and distribute it to libraries to help explain to both librarians and patrons what the heck precision medicine is. This was when NIH was trying to get everyone to give them their data, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? I always like to highlight this fun one, Health and Wealth, a graphic guide to the US healthcare system that James Sturm put together with some students from Harvard Medical School while he was at Radcliffe. And then they funded this to send a copy to Congress to highlight that GoFundMe is the biggest funder of healthcare outside of Medicaid. Some webcomic examples. I'm gonna skip through some examples here for you. Topics on everything from climate change to human rights and abortion care. In recent years, we've seen a resurgence of educational comics about sex education, which is amazing and great, but they're also a big part of why we're seeing comics challenged again in schools and libraries, this panic about children having access to books, genderqueer being the most challenged and banned book in the United States for about 5 years in a row. But it's an amazing story, and I hope everyone gives these a chance. Any academic folks in the room? Couple? We worked on a scoping review a while back to examine how comics have been used in health education. Turns out there's a long history of it. But we really, really want everyone who does studies with comics to say that they're comics. So many people shy away from calling the work that they've created a comic that it makes it really hard to find because you wind up with this search string that's got to include comics, cartoons, graphic novels, manga, manhwa, visual sequential narratives, or is one of my favorite absurd academic terms for them. Just call them a comic instead of coming up with a fancy word is my plea to everyone. I don't think this room needs convincing, but I give it every talk. This is a timeline from that study. If you feel like reading it, ask me about it. Basically, people have been using comics for health education for as long as people have been making comics. It's just not that super well studied until recent years, and now we know that it works. If you're a teacher and want to talk about graphic medicine, this is where I pitch you suggested resources before having our panelists talk. The Graphic Medicine Syllabus Repository is somewhere where we, on the Graphic Medicine website, which is run by Graphic Medicine, the nonprofit, we collect syllabi and share them for everybody. So if you're teaching classes on comics or cartooning that's relevant to health and don't know where to start or are looking for ideas, we put those up and help everyone out. We also have our own award. I know the Reubens are coming, that's cooler than ours, but the Graphic Medicine International Collective, this year we had 3 awards for Outstanding Long-Form Comic, Outstanding Short-Form Comic, and new this time, Outstanding Educational Comic. one of our panelists was a shortlister for these awards this year. But you can see our winners here. We had Breathe by Maya Kobabe and Sarah Putzmeyer. I can't read it from here. Jellyfish from Boom, and Sunflowers by Kizzy Young. That link will get you to more information about them. So real quick, as we've seen, we're talking about the combination of comics and medicine. How far you want to stretch this is up to you. Defining a comic is, if you're a comic studies person, it's like touching the third rail. Good luck. Where's the line between a picture book and a comic? Don't ask me. And then if you want to stretch the definition of medicine as far as you want, I'm here for it. I include social justice work and graphic medicine in our collection at Harvard, thinking that our students need to know that history in order to be competent and compassionate and effective, physicians. So when we're talking about graphic medicine, I'm talking about 4 different things. We've got the genre, which is mostly what I've been yammering about. We've got the field of study, which explores, how we can use comics for education, for empathy development, for burnout prevention. We've got graphic medicine as a practice, which is focused on integrating comics into the practice, promotion, and education, right? So it's some of that act of making the comics ourselves. I invite med students to create comics and zines all the time. We hold zine workshops monthly to try to get them to get beyond just rote memorization and science and get some humanity back. And we're also a community of enthusiasts. I can talk forever about this, but I'll stop. And before I hand it over, this is a page from the Graphic Medicine Manifesto. If you want to know why Susan Squire is a chicken, get the book and read it. But I always refer back to this bottom right panel. So too, graphic medicine resists the notion of the universal patient and vividly represents multiple subjects with valid and at times conflicting points of view and experience. And that's the big emphasis on why I like to use comics for education in medicine, because you can capture the patient's perspective, the doctor's perspective, the family's perspective, and they might all be in conflict, but they might also all be equally valid. And what better way to have that visually communicated than through comics? So now I'm going to stop talking and pass it over.
Let me get my notes here. Thank you, Matthew. That was awesome. My name is Heide Solbrig. I'm a cartoonist, communications scholar, assistant professor at MassArt. I teach and run the visual storytelling, and comics art certificate program. And I'm very excited because a number of my students are also speaking. And what I have found is that telling stories about particularly mental health is deeply embedded in sort of the new generation of comic storytelling. And what I realized as I was putting together this presentation is that my own work consistently addresses a theme that relates to graphic medicine as well, which is I tell the story of social and popular psychology because it is a central theme in my mother's life, who, as a divorced single mom working as a psychiatric social worker in Los Angeles. This meant she was involved in a lot of pop psychology movements, including EST and TM, and most particularly the Encounter group. So if you'll see there are some actual want ads for like these self-actualized therapy groups that were like popular in the 1970s. So I tell a story about that in the Dandelion King. Oh. Did I push here? Okay. And I tell sort of a broader story about the ways that popular and social psychology has really become like this trope in our society in the post-war era. So Kurt Lewin is a guy who invented some group dynamics, which if you're interested in the origins of DEI in the workplace and how therapy movements dovetail with the civil rights movement. A number of refugee psychiatrists from Nazi Germany were eager to create therapeutic systems, i.e. small group discussions which could inoculate us from racism, starting in the early 1950s. So if you've ever been in a small group at work, This comes out of the Kurt Lewin model, and it has a very intentional trajectory. And telling the story as a comic was kind of a way of really realizing that like feminist old trope of like the personal is political. So thinking about consciousness raising, and so what I did, and I won a hackathon, a PBS hackathon, where I did an app that accompanied my my comic book. So just to give you a little sense of what that, it was just like looked at Carl Rogers and countergroups, and also most particularly R.D. Laing, who did the anti-psychiatry movement, and that also fits in with some of my family's personal history here. So this is just Kurt Lewin film stills. Lewin hypothesized that different forms of leadership could influence social structure from authoritarian to democratic. So leadership is important according to Lewin. And that's what they're trying to do in those DEI groups, is try to keep us democratic. I think I missed a slide here. Let me see. Okay, this is actually next. And this is the story of my family. My mom worked at the Metropolitan State Hospital in Norwalk, California in the 1970s, which was one of the most serious, like cited for abuses in psychiatric care in that period. She was desperate to get out, and thanks to the anti-psychiatry movement, along with the development of some psychiatric medications that allowed people with serious mental illness to live more freely, people started moving into community care. And my mom was able to work with those people. And this is just a short motion media that also accompanied the book, which was, we lived in a community with halfway houses, and there's a guy who walked up and down our block every day for 10 years. And he had a very strange gait. And at 10, I was like, Mom, what's going on with that guy? And she was like, oh, that's the Thorazine shuffle, which is a phrase that people in the psychiatric field use for the medication with Thorazine. And I had a very whimsical interpretation of that. I saw it as kind of a dance. And so I try to tell that story of that movement along with my, youthful interpretation of it. So. This is a little mini book that I did called I Am Not a Dog, about living with my dad in hospice. And my dog was dying at the same time my dad was dying, and we had a lot of conversations about what to do with the dog. And my dad, who was very firm in his own agency about his own death, said this phrase a lot: I am not a dog. You can't make the same decisions about me that you're making about the dog. Which was, by the way, that we wanted to keep the dog alive. Anyways, this is him. He loved flowers, but he was very sad. And this is him being funny. So then this is my final and current book project. This is Alice Salomon School of Social Work, a selection from the Heide Solbrig book project, working title. And this is the shots from an album from Alice Salomon School of Social Work, which was the first school of social work in Europe in the 1920s. And these are sort of reworkings of real historical images of Alice Salomon hanging out in her school with these very intellectual discussions that they're having about the role of women in care work for women as public professionals. So I'm going to read you the description of the book itself because it's complicated, and I often kind of am like, how do I describe this? The book is the story of Heide Solbrig, who was a German woman who is documented as both a collaborator and resistor during the Nazi regime. Solbrig attended Alice and Salomon's Progressive School of Social Work in the 1920s, lobbied to let women join the police as reformers, and joined the police in a cadre of 6 gender nonconforming women in 1927, became a member of the Kripo, the criminal police, as the Nazis rose to power, was the lover of a war criminal, compatriot of the Bonhoeffer group, who were the people who planned the plot to kill Hitler, was peripherally involved in the plot to kill Hitler, And the whole book is really about the compromised character of social work and of social care. And Heide Solbrig is my namesake, and she was my grandfather's cousin. That's it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kara Bean, and welcome to Boston. Both of my parents were born in Boston, and I'm from Massachusetts, and I'm just kind of thrilled to have this room of cartoonists in here. I'm happy to be here with you. My work is, if you can't tell by my energy, I'm a teacher. I work as a high school art teacher for many years, and I've also been doing comics for about 15 years. And my work in graphic medicine came out of my work in education. So even though I was the art teacher, mental health came up very often in the classroom. And so I made I actually attended some workshops about depression and suicide ideation. And I'm an obsessive doodler. I'm just always drawing when I'm trying to pay attention. And so I ended up taking notes in these workshops. And because I'm a cartoonist, my notes are all comics. And it ended up being really useful to people. So out of that, I call it the project that wouldn't go away, but people kept asking if they could use my notes or borrow the pictures and so on and so on. And I eventually surrendered to the concept of making, the first thing I made called Snake Pit spoke to adults that work with kids. And then I was sort of challenged with, could you create something that spoke directly to kids about mental health? And then I did Let's Talk About It with the Center for Cartoon Studies in Vermont. And I worked on that while I was working on this larger book called Here I Am Me, an illustrated guide to mental health. And that's like a 288-page visual, it's a comic, it's all comics, but it's, what do we call it? Illustrated guide. So funny about language. But yeah, just if you haven't seen or heard of it, these are the chapters that are inside the book. It's just a kind of overall primer, but it really does look inside of neuroscience and the brain, as well as a bit about therapy and symptoms and substance use. And it was a lot of collaboration with many brilliant people. I'm going to do a quick little reading from the chapter about stigma. So here we go. The origin of the word stigma comes from ancient Greece. I declare that this person is bad. Yeah, everybody needs to know how bad this person is. Hold still. A stigma was once a way for someone in power to physically mark an enslaved, oppressed, or otherwise controlled person. This is unfair. What if it's not true? Stigma is now a word in modern society for an invisible mark on a person that makes us think of something negative. Instead of a physical mark, it's an idea. As a cartoonist, I like to draw the idea of stigma as a monster. What a slimeball. Stigma can make it hard for people to share their emotions. You are bad. Stigma happens when a society or group of people form a set of negative or unfair beliefs about a person or group or characteristics associated with them. Bad, bad, bad. Stigma makes a person feel like an outsider. You're not one of us. Because of stigma, a lot of people don't get help for their mental health problems. Stigma shows itself in the words that people use to label a person. Stigma can also come from the inside. It can show itself in the way that you feel about yourself. I must be bad. Sometimes it seems like stigma is everywhere, judging you for all sorts of things. So how do we fight stigma? One way you can fight is by being here and not running away when I bring up mental health. Like, good job. That's just a little taste. And then just also for any of you that are interested in neuroscience, I found it really fun to make characters out of the different areas of the brain. And you got your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala and your hippocampus. Anyway, I love that cartooning is a way you can instantly incorporate character, but also like diagrams, and just leans itself in so many beautiful ways. But I'll stop there.
Hi, everyone. My name's Caroline Hu. Thank you for having me today. I am a biology professor. I'm also a cartoonist. I teach biology primarily to art and design students right here in Boston at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. It's a lot of fun. My cartooning practice is mostly focused on science communication. My first graphic novel is coming out this fall. It's a middle grade biography of Jacques Cousteau with Penguin Workshop. And so, thanks, thank you. And so while science communication, I would say, is primarily the focus of my comics, I would really credit graphic medicine for pulling me back into comics, because I was deep into postdoctoral research. And my mom received a terminal cancer diagnosis. And it was this big collision of science, health, and emotion. And I would say I had taken a break from I was still drawing, but I kind of taken a break from finishing anything. And so a graphic medicine piece was my first comic after many years. And now at Mass Art, I do bring together science and comics and teach a class both on science communication and comics, as well as a graphic medicine class. I want to show you now the first comic I made in a long time, which was also after I'd read Brian Fee's Mom's Cancer, and I also was like, this is possible? So my comic was called Our Unknown Path, and I kind of visualized the Yawkey building of Mass General in like a Mobius desert planet. And I really brought in science fiction because, well, I guess being the biologist child, I could read about these up-and-coming therapies like precision medicine, CAR T-cell therapy, and unfortunately I knew that these would not be available in time. So for me, science fiction just was a way to bring it out of myself but not have to actually glare right into that hot grief sun. So here's me with sort of with my mother character, and getting that sort of precision analysis, and then visualizing actually receiving something like CAR T therapy. Now in teaching, I want to lighten the mood a little bit. I do invite in students and I tell them, bring yourself, your true self, to your work, because I believe science communication, health communication should be as diverse as its audience is. And I want to show you an example of a comic that was created by a student and also an anatomy professor. So I have one class where every student gets paired with a scientist, and they make work about that scientist's research. And this student, I was like, yeah, bring yourself into this. So he's a skateboarder, and the professor he was working with is an anatomy professor, particularly interested in tissue engineering, creating new tendons for people who say have had an injury. And she was like, listen, us tissue engineers, we have a bad reputation. People think we're creepy. We're like Frankensteins. And why don't we instead try to show how we work with the living, and we can help you return to a better state of health. So this is what they created. I'm going to do a quick reading as well. So first, cool guy skateboarding, tries to do a sick trick. Oh no. So, ow, I think I tore something. Oh, and then this building behind him, it now doesn't look so good either. But now it's kind of come the next part where hopefully you'll never forget this comic again, because his skateboard then comes to life and says, Dante, no sweat, help is on the way. and look at the amazing legs on this thing. Tissue engineering could aid in your recovery. And he says, but Sergio, aren't tissue engineers creepy and weird? Not at all. And Sergio goes on to explain, anatomists and tissue engineers, which, of course always look like this, work together to help the living and restore injuries. We get to see some of the cells that we're hoping to grow. And then Sergio also walks through the step-by-step procedure where we take cells, and then we actually provide cells with a scaffold on which they can start to grow and actually build some 3D structure. Because ultimately, what we want to return to somebody is a 3D structure. And now these tissues are ready to implant after this process. And then Sergio points out, you see, Dante, it's a lot like this building behind you. It also needed some engineering and support to get repaired. And Dante says, wow, look at all that scaffolding. So ultimately, Dante does receive this implant, and Sergio signs off saying, now everyone can get back to doing all the physical activities they love. Time to ride. And now that sick trick is landed. And yeah, so this is something I think that is, of course, educational for the student, because I don't think they knew this much about tissue engineering, but also to show how they have learned. This whole scaffold metaphor, it came from the student who I think up until at that point didn't actually know how tissue engineering works. And I would say both student and professor were quite happy with this outcome, and seems like it also made a few of you smile, so thank you very much.
Hi. So I am Sofia Kornienko, and I go by just Nienko in my artistic work. I'm an animation artist and visual journalist based in Boston, and I'm trying to tell real stories with animation and comics. I've got many, many years of traditional broadcast journalism behind my back, and now my current focus is a comics journalism project that is called Free to Browse, which is about transgender teens growing up online and the internet as a lifeline. It's basically challenging the idea of age gating and censorship on the internet. The first chapter of this project is already available on my website at nienko.com, and I'll be showing you just do a quick read of some panels from the first chapter and a few pages from several other chapters. The project is basically a set of interviews and first-person accounts by teens, and the first chapter is about my son. Are you feeling embarrassed that your breasts are starting to show? Should we go pick out a nice bra together? And this is the face that my son usually would give me when he was still closeted, when I would be saying something stupid. Everest, which is not his real name, but the way he wanted to be called in the book, Everest really enjoyed walking around the house with no shirt on. I guess it made him feel boyish. Honestly, it's a sensory thing. I just feel more comfortable not wearing clothes. I'm still really proud of myself for hiding the bikini that you bought me. No one could find it behind the bookshelf for 2 years. After puberty hit, I could only experience that comfort alone in my room when no one else was around. Even then, I would cover my chest with my shirt. I can't wait to be able to just freely not wear shirts again after I have top surgery. Call us, because duct tape isn't a long-term solution. Please don't actually bind with duct tape. Although now I do worry it may become more difficult to get top surgery. Everest's childhood in Europe, wearing sandals in the snow to prove a point to me. If I weren't online, none of my life would have happened. None of it. Long before Everest knew he was trans, he had a strong sense that something about how everyone perceived him was way off. He developed a philosophy, not to let other people tell him how he should and shouldn't live his life. Freezing my feet in the snow was less bad than saying yes to someone. It was his way of staying true to his core self, of preserving who he really was. How did you guys like it up on the Eiffel Tower? Was it really cold? It wasn't even painful. I actually had a good time doing it. It felt extremely liberating. Look at that. She got herself nice boots and couldn't even be bothered to get a pair of shoes for her kid. I did empathize with you, Mom, but the desire to do this was stronger than empathy. I thought about it in a more mature way than you did, even though I was 6. I thought, Mom will get over it, and you did. And this is from a chapter about a different kid that I interviewed. I first ignored puberty until I couldn't. Then my old best friend, Stephanie, I can't really see, gave me her sister's old chest binder. We struggled to get it on, which gave us a good laugh. This person asked me to draw them with a mask on, a mask that came from a very popular Japanese comic that they were a fan of. Sorry, it's very small. I can't read this, but maybe I can read it that way. But basically, oh, great, thank you. We ended up cutting down through the back, and I sewed some extra fabric onto it. I actually wore it to a wedding, and surprisingly, everyone thought it was a bra, including my mother, who later let me buy a new one because the stitching broke. And this is from yet another teens chapter, who was telling me how they were feeling uncomfortable in all-female spaces. My parents convinced me that it was a normal part of childhood to dream of being a boy. I brought it up to them when I was about 6. Yes, it's normal. It'll go away when you get older. So I kept waiting, and it never did. So I kept thinking, oh, they must mean older. So I just keep waiting. Well, I don't have breasts like the rest of the girls in my family. So as long as I cut my hair and wear pants all the time, people will think I'm a boy. Well, there goes that plan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm gonna temper the mood a little bit. I'm Sylvie Lardeux. I'm a scientist. I lead a team of data scientists in healthcare for my day job, and I draw comic when I have time. I bring today, I have been really interested in the healthcare in different aspects, both around chronic disease, the experience of chronic diseases, as well as mental health and the experience of health. Like I said, I work in the healthcare industry. So healthcare in America is very complicated to be in. It's very isolating when you have a condition that is chronic or is complicated. So I believe that comics can really help people that are affected to feel less alone and to help them advocate for themselves too. And that's really why I think it's a great way to help, either on the form of memoir or journalism. Like the lived experience can help others that are something similar or different but feel less isolated. So this is a memoir part that happened a long time ago, and is not extremely joyous, but I will do a quick read of it. So I was finishing veterinary school, and I decided to stop smoking by taking Chantix, and that did not work very well for me. It made me stop eating totally and develop anorexia. And I still continue smoking, by the way. So I developed the classical sign of anorexia, which like a difficulty with body and difficulty eating anything and counting calories. I think at the time in my life, there was a lot going on that probably were confounding factors, and I think that's important. It's probably not one thing. And really went really deep in kind of that anorexia phase for a couple of years, including some self-harm. And I think that something that was really hard for me to talk about, and I actually drew this comic to talk to my therapist about it. Eventually, when you don't eat, you can't think. And that's really very straightforward. Your brain gets foggy, you can't really think, you can't do anything. And I needed my brain. That was the only thing that mattered to me. That was the only thing that mattered in my family. And like literally, my grandfather stopped eating when he thought his brain was not good enough and decided to prefer to die than not work. So I decided that I needed to do something to avoid the same fate. So I had a plan. I created a plan. In France, we have this stuff called class préparatoire. I won't go into it, but it's a painful time in your life where you work like crazy to try to go to a good school, and I loved it. It was fantastic. So I decided I needed to recreate that event to be able to save my brain. So I decided to go do a PhD. That was the best idea I ever had, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna need to work a lot, I'm gonna need to think a lot, I'm gonna need to eat. So I ate, and eventually I was able to kind of overcome the sickness. And of course, this type of problematic, whether it's disordered eating or other mental health issue, they don't come out of nowhere. So there's always other things to the background to deal with, but that's what therapy is for. So thank you very much.
I'm going to ask you all questions, so I'll just stand here as soon as I get back to the slide I want. All right, so thanks everyone for sharing some of your work. I wanted to, since you're all coming from different spaces and backgrounds, right? But you're all creating comics that have health-related topics. So I'm curious about what the research process that goes into creating this graphic medicine work is like for each of you. Is it any different than other comics you've done? Like, where do you start? What are the stumbling blocks with that? Anyone can jump in.
Okay, Hello, okay, it's working. So, yeah, I think for me, the work I was doing was very much research-based, so I had to do a lot of homework, which I was not a good student as a young person. So I was like, man, look, my whole life is just doing homework now. So it was a lot of, just a lot of sorting through things. And then ideally, my goal was to make it approachable for like a middle schooler. So how much information is enough information and what's the right information? And the way I was able to enter this field and not feel completely defeated was the graphic medicine community. Number one, I had started attending their conferences after I had made that little zine, and I was like, oh, I'm getting pulled into this. I met lovely psychologists and scientists and other educators and academics who were encouraging. And then when I started making my work, I had a base of people to send out chapters to and have them give me feedback. And I think for me, because I'm not an expert and I'm not a mental health professional. I'm just like a human that was like, I think this would be a good thing, and will you help me make it? It was so important to collaborate with others and like get those notes. So it was a very long, tedious process in a way, just the writing of it. As a cartoonist, I love to draw, and that part didn't freak me out. Like, I'm happy to redraw things and try different metaphors, and that was fun. But for me, it was just getting the content correct. Like, that for me, that was a piece that was maybe different from making like just a story about my life or my cat or whatever. Yeah.
Is this on? Maybe I can be the alternate there, which is I started as an academic, and there's this point when my like whole academic career was kind of imploding, and I realized that like a successful academic article, the readership was considered, like a successful like peer-reviewed article, like they expected maybe 20 or 30 people to read it, and I was like, this is ridiculous. And I knew that I was writing about social psychology and about obscure media stuff, but I actually thought it had relevance. It had relevance to like the life that my mom had led. It had relevance that people could read that was more about regular lives. So I started as an artist before I went to grad school, and I was just like, I'm just gonna draw stuff, and I love research. I love looking up weird stuff. And so that part was really, really fun for me.
Any other?
I'll chime in. So when it comes to research, I still have journal access through my prior employer. So I read, the literature. But also, often when, say, a federal government in a different previous attitude towards science funds research, they will often require that the research be publicly available. So I also, because I know that, there have been times where right now I'm working on a story about human development, and I was like, well, there must be some sort of atlas online of like the human embryo. And sure enough, there's a whole 3D atlas of the human embryo that I was able to find. So I think having some of that prior knowledge does help me do my research a little bit faster.
Yeah.
And I also, once I find these things though, I also just tell all my students about it. It's like, look, it's here. Like, the references are right here.
I don't have any problems with research either, because being a journalist and everything. What I do find different is that I really have to make sure I don't re-traumatize anyone, and that it's somehow beneficial, benevolent, in a way, opening some new perspectives to look at those pictures. Like, for example, I had an instance when I wanted to really convey to people who don't know what being trans is and how that feels, to like show what the first period feels like according to my son and according to the other teens that I've talked to. And I drew this teen whose chapter it was with like crying black tears, and both my son and the person whom I was drawing, they were like, this really freaks me out and I don't want to see this. So you have to constantly communicate whether this would be a relevant visualization of what they're experiencing.
Yeah, for me, is that working? Yeah? Oh, okay. For me, the research is not an issue either, and I love making complicated problems more simple. So that's great, that's a fun part. But it's like how to bring the emotional component within it and bringing that, to bring the reader's empathy where you want it, that I think is the most interesting part and can be difficult, how you transform something linear and boring. Being sick is boring. It is. But create a story out of that where others can relate.
Being sick is boring it can get monotonous, right? Like it's just the same all the time. Speaking from experience. I guess because some of you have shared, some of your work is very personal, and I guess I'm curious, we talk in the graphic medicine community a lot about this idea of getting it out there, being cathartic and helpful to put it out on paper and share with others. But then we've also, over the years, seen a bit of a backlash to that idea, right? Like you mentioned possible re-traumatization. Have you all had experience with this? Like, what has this process of getting it out been like for you all? Is it helpful to share? Are you sometimes hesitant to share? Don't overshare here if you don't feel like answering, but that's where this question is going.
Yeah, I can take this one. For me, it has been very helpful and very difficult in the same time, but very helpful. It really helped solve something, because I think the combination of drawing and telling the story is much more powerful than just telling the story. Because the visualization helps, at least for me, helped solve a lot of things. So now sharing is vulnerable and that's difficult, but it's also a positive challenge for me.
I can go next. So I was thinking about this question and about, it is a tricky thing. Like it's funny, since my book has come out, some people have invited me to work with young people, teens, and have them tell their stories. And I'm very protective of them because I feel like it's something you have to choose to do and feel comfortable doing, and you shouldn't have to do it if you don't want to do it. And there are definitely benefits to doing it, but in what context and what kind of support do you have? So for me, I do share some personal stories in my book, but I do it in the way that I would as an educator, where I'm very conscious of how much I'm telling you. And like, I certainly haven't written my memoir that goes into my darkest, deepest, maybe someday I will, but that hasn't happened in this book. But I would say maybe the chapter that was maybe the most challenging for me to write was substance use and addiction, because there's a lot of that in my family, and I do talk a little bit more about that. And because, you know, my parents' generation did not talk about it at all, it felt very like, wow, I can't believe I'm writing this down, and like making sure people are okay with that, and kind of like testing the water. But I was really happy that, yeah, like the people that are alive today in my family were like, do it, it's great, you know, we support you. But I did have a few people read it before I knew I was going to publish it.
I can say that it's really hard to tell if this is on or not. I can say that I do tell stories that often include some uncomfortable truths, and that can be, and it is really challenging to figure out the balance there of truths that you feel like you have ownership over versus the ones that you have ownership over, but other people have ownership over also. And so, like for instance, with the Heide Solbrig story, everybody from her generation is dead, but her grandniece is alive. There's a question, like that side of my family was Jewish, but was not open about it during World War II. People have asked me to not talk about that. I'm probably not going to do that. So, but there are definitely, you know, issues that come up, and sometimes there are times when people ask you not to tell truths that are your truths, and because they overlap with their truths, and that is a really complicated, like, moral choice that one has to like make on a case-to-case basis, and it's not easy.
I was definitely compelled to make the comic I showed in my slides because I wanted to make my own meaning of what was happening to me. And, if I see any of you out there is making a comic about grief, I want it. And I think, people might ask, why do you want to read like such sad stuff? And I really think it's because, I'm exploring your sadness, I'm sharing my sadness, but by doing this, like, I feel a little bit less alone. And that is really why I want it.
To me, it's a way to take myself less seriously. And the more I draw, the less seriously I take myself. And I'm also trying to, I guess, anonymize most of the people that I'm writing about or drawing, and I think it gives like a totally new language. I actually pivoted to more visual journalism because I got completely entangled in the several languages that I used for my work, and I just wanted to find like another language to talk about things, which also allows, you know, instead of specific words, maybe creating distance between the serious issue and you know, your perception of it in like a completely new way.
I have so many follow-up questions, but no time. So in order for us to get wrapped up, I would just ask, can each of you share something upcoming you're excited about? Comics, graphic medicine-wise, anything coming up that you want people to know about that you haven't already pitched? Yeah, if you want to, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just working on my book. I will say that's what I'm doing. I'm working on the Heide Solbrig project, which also working title of a nice old German name.
I just read a book I loved. It was called Your Brain on Art, and it's like very supportive of how the arts can affect us in a positive way and can be actually healing. And I'm super interested, especially with this group, like how you feel about drawing, what it does for your brain, for your mind. When does it get dark? When does it like lift your mood? And like how does it shift with you as you age? And how has it been your companion? Like, so if you want to chit chat with me about drawing, like that's what I'm really interested right now in.
Matt, I think we should talk about the New England Graphic Medicine Summit. All right, so hello. If you are based in New England this fall at the Longwood Medical Campus here in Boston, we will be having a summit all about graphic medicine. We are inviting cartoonists, scholars, students, of course, medical care professionals as well to just congregate together. We're going to just nerd out about graphic medicine and also offer some workshops. You can follow bit.ly/NEGM25. And also, I'll be sticking around the rest of today if you want to talk about it with me.
Yeah, or just ask us, because the bit.lys get weird.
Sorry.
Just go to Caroline's Instagram. She posts everything. Well, I'm excited that I'm going back to school. I think I'll be like the oldest student. And I'm going to do a Master's of Fine Art in Visual Narrative at Boston University College of Fine Arts. And I hope that this project will be my thesis that I was just pitching, or not pitching, but talking about.
I realized I should somehow pitch the Mass Art Continuing Ed Certificate Program that is, you know.
Yes, I was Heide's student for like 2 years.
And they're awesome.
She's
like,
great.
Yeah, it's an all-online program that has had some really amazing people go through it. And it's just actually a really nice community that is building around cartooning, and a lot of like mid-career professional artists who we have a space to make cartoons, and it's a blast. It's just,
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your work and your expertise. If you have questions for any of these amazing people, here's where to find them. Snap a photo of the slide. Bother them throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. That was fantastic. We really, really appreciate it. Audience members, thanks for being here. Live streamers, if you're with us, thank you for being here. We'll be back in 15 minutes for our final session of the day, so thank you very much.